to have compassion for all of the younger versions of myself that were doing the best they knew how in the only way they knew how. If they knew there was another way to get love, they would have chosen it.
Welcome to Love Stories, a relationship podcast for successful women, where we talk about love, dating, relationships, and how great love stories are made. Whether you're searching for the one, you're madly in love, or simply curious about romantic relationships, this podcast is for you. I'm Charlene Byars. Each week, you'll hear from women, couples, and experts, and all the ins and outs on how to create your own love story. I am so passionate about this subject, and I'm so excited to share all the things that you can apply to create a beautiful love story of your own. Cheers to great love. Welcome back to the Love Stories podcast. I'm your host, Charlene Byars. I want to give a huge thank you to everyone that has been listening to this podcast and has subscribed, left a review, and shared it. I really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. This has absolutely have been a labor of love, and your support means everything. And that's how we've been able to continue on bringing these amazing guests and these amazing conversations every week because of you. So thank you. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the Love Stories podcast. And thank you for tuning in each week. It means the world to me and the team that puts this all together each week to make it happen. And if you ever have any questions, or if there's a guest that you would like to see on the show, please reach out to us. You can send me an email at charlene@charlenebyars.com. I would love to hear from you. Let's talk about the tip of the week, which is romantic relationships are supposed to enhance your life, not detract from it. Romantic relationships are meant to enhance your life, and romantic relationships are not supposed to be hard. And romantic relationships are not supposed to be toxic. I think there's a big misconception about romantic relationships and what is true and not true. We've heard through the years that relationships are hard. Men and women don't get along, and that's just how it is. But that's not true. And that's not why we should be getting into romantic relationships. Because romantic relationships should feel safe. They should feel like you are literally married to your best friend. And a romantic relationship is where you come for comfort because life is hard and your relationship with the person you love should be easy. When we as individuals take care of ourselves and we really understand who we are and how we show up, then we don't blame our partners and we don't try to control the outcome. We simply let things be and accept our partners for who they are. We realize that we mature and we change, and the person we are at 20 is not going to be the same person at 30 or even 40. That's why it's important to allow change. And trust me, I understand that there are times in romantic relationships when there will be disagreements. But those disagreements are an opportunity to learn more about one another and grow closer. Because when romantic relationships are centered with love and respect, you have an opportunity to grow and deepen your love with each other. So if you find yourself in a relationship that's hard, where you don't feel safe and you both are going opposite ways, my suggestion is get professional help. Sometimes a shift in perspective is all you need to get back on track and having fun and being in love. I am so thrilled to welcome my next guest to the show today, Michelle Willard. Michelle Willard is a dedicated life and relationship coach. specializing in guiding women who have lost their sense of identity and purpose inside unhealthy relationships. After navigating her own journey of compromising her standards and sacrificing her needs for the sake of her marriage, Michelle experienced a profound awakening in 2016 when her relationship reached a breaking point. Feeling hopeless, alone, and disconnected from herself, she embarked on a healing journey, not only restored her sense of self, but also revitalized her marriage. Motivated by her desire to support others on the path to transformation, Michelle pursued training in life coaching through the Christian organization Alive and Free Consulting, drawing from her background as an educator, trauma-informed yoga instructor, and a social emotional learning facilitator. She offers a unique blend of personal insight and professional expertise. Through her compassion-filled one-on-one sessions and her engaging online courses, Michelle empowers women from around the world to rediscover themselves and reconnect with a life of purpose and fulfillment. Wow. This was such an incredible conversation I had with Michelle. What a journey that she's been through, discovering who she was and how she didn't realize that she was a codependent and how that affected her in her relationships. And what an incredible story about how her and her husband both decided to go inwards and do the work to become the best versions of themselves and changing the way they were showing up for each other, to now having the relationship of their dreams and becoming each other's best friends. Wow. With no further ado, Michelle Willard.
Well, hello, Michelle. Oh, yes. Hi, Michelle. So
Hello, I love your
excited.
energy.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've been so excited to talk to you. I think I was thinking about like what did I want to talk to you first? And what I thought about first is I just want to say I absolutely love the work that you're doing and how you are helping women. And I'm so excited to get into I had an opportunity with you in our pre-call to learn a little bit about you, but I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to hear the whole thing." So, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for having this conversation with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Okay. So I know I just said it like, okay, the work Michelle does. And obviously, this podcast is about love, relationships, the romance, the dating, all things love. And I believe too that for that to happen, it first has to start with us first. So take me back, Michelle, because I know that you are married now, but you were married before, and how your
Mhm.
life was at one point and how your life is now is completely different. So let's go
Yeah.
there. So tell me about Michelle when she was younger and how you actually grew up. Where'd you grow up, Michelle?
Well, I grew up in Northeast Ohio. I was actually a pastor's kid. My
Oh,
dad was a youth pastor,
okay.
but he kind of lived a different life at home versus at church. And I remember growing up always wishing that I could be. He was a youth pastor, and I always couldn't wait until I was a teenager so that I could get that love and affection that he gave those kids. Um,
Oh, yes.
and one of the things that I specifically shared with you was his mother. Whenever we would go to visit her, she lived in Pennsylvania, and every time
Okay.
that we would go to visit her from the time I was 6 years old, the very first question that she would always ask me was, "Do you have a boyfriend?" So it was ingrained in me that I was not okay if I didn't have a boyfriend. And so
Wow. So
I
this was
always
from a
had
very
a
young
boyfriend.
age. No,
Yes.
but oh wow, you've always had a boyfriend. No, Michelle, wow.
Always,
That
always, always
is
had a boyfriend. Yeah.
so the way that you grew up was so basically, your grandmother and the people around you, they just assumed like that's just what for women, like you just gotta have a boyfriend, gotta get married. I mean, what was the message?
I mean, that was the message that I received. Whether or not that was what she was trying to communicate, that's what I received as a child.
Okay.
Oftentimes we receive a different message than what their intention was. I'm sure that her intention was not for me to have a boyfriend from the time I was 6 years old. But in my mind, in my 6-year-old mind, it was oh, okay, I must need a boyfriend.
I must need a
And
boyfriend.
so
Yes. So,
I made sure that I always had a boyfriend.
Michelle, I can't imagine you at 6 years old. You're like, okay, I need my little boyfriend. Oh, that's adorable. Because 6 is 6, girlfriend. Like, right? You're like, I don't even know what that means. I like him. He's nice, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
So, what about your parents, Michelle? So, you said your dad was a youth pastor. Now, were your parents
yeah.
married? Stayed married when you grew up? Did you have brothers and sisters?
So so I had a younger brother.
Okay.
My parents actually married because they got pregnant with me. My dad was actually a senior in high school
Oh, wow.
when my mom got pregnant. Yeah, so
Okay.
they got married in February of his senior year, and I was born the following September. And then 5 years later, my brother arrived, and then by the time I was 14, my parents ended up getting divorced, and it was in that season that first of all, I became very judgmental of them and
Okay.
anybody that got divorced. I just vowed that I would never get divorced. And so it just became my dream that I was going to one day have a husband and family of my own. And if you would have asked me from the time I was 14 on, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would have told you I want to be a wife and a mom. So it just became my dream to have that
Mm-hmm.
family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It did. So it
So,
seemed like from a young age. Well, hold on, Michelle. Like it did. It seemed like from a
yeah.
very young age, like you said, that seed was already planted, meaning they wanted to
Mhm.
plant it or not plant it, but that was your goal. That's truly what you
Mhm.
wanted at the time. Your
Yeah.
goal was, I definitely want to be a wife. I want to have
Mhm.
children, and we are definitely not going to get divorced.
Right. And in my
Okay.
mind, that would make me whole. That would make me
That
complete.
would make you whole. Okay. So how
Mhm.
did that happen? So what was your life like before, you found your first husband? I mean, were you dating? When did you start dating? Did you go to school, not go to school? What was that like?
Yeah, I never stopped dating. Yeah, so like I said, I always had a boyfriend.
Mhm.
I had two pretty serious boyfriends in high school, and just dated around a little bit in college. But 6 days after I graduated from college, I found out that I was pregnant.
Oh,
Um, and it was unfortunately not somebody that I was dating. It was a really good friend, and
okay.
he and I had a little too much fun that night, and so yeah, I found out that I was pregnant, and he did not want to be a dad. He was not ready to be a dad. But even though I was not following um, the faith of my parents at the time, I did not want to get an abortion. I was like, I know that I have not lived a Christian lifestyle, but I refused to get an abortion.
Mhm.
Um,
How old are you,
yeah,
Michelle?
so
How old were you
I
at the
was
time?
20, I was 22. I was 22.
I myself also, I wasn't following when I was younger too. I wasn't following any Christian faith. I really never was presented with any of that. And I remember finding myself 3 months before I graduated high school getting
Mm,
pregnant. And for me
mhm,
too, Michelle, it was the same thing. Like I never even considered having an abortion. Like it was just like, okay, and I was 18 years old. I didn't have my son until he was 19. And I was,
mhm,
I had a boyfriend at the time, and he wasn't really the right guy for me, but that's it. I was pregnant, and we thought, okay, for in that case, our case was a little different. I know your guy was like, nope, I don't want to do it. I
yeah,
thought, we should. I thought doing the right thing was getting married, but it had not. It wasn't driven by like my religion or anything of that. It was kind of
mhm.
like
Yeah,
that's what you do. But with me
right.
too, I thought, okay, cool, here we go. My son's 33 now. Is the best thing that ever happened to me. But yeah, so I totally understand that. So he was like, I don't want to. I'm not ready. I don't want to be a father. But you're like, okay, well, it's here. It's coming. I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
so I proceeded
Hmm.
to I moved back to Northeast Ohio. This is where I grew up, but while I was away at college, my mom got remarried and my dad moved away. So I came back to Northeast Ohio and was literally homeless. I did not have a place to
Wow.
come home to.
You
So
did
I was
not.
homeless. and pregnant. And was
Michelle! Wow, mama.
yeah.
That's a
So
lot.
I was
That's a lot. Okay.
sleeping on a friend's couch for a couple weeks before she and I were able to save up enough to rent a house together. And so I rented a house with 3 other girls.
Okay.
And while I was there, I was substitute teaching during the day, and I was telemarketing in the evenings. And about 4 months into my pregnancy, I went to church, and God just was speaking to me through this service. And
Wow.
I went forward at the end and I remember telling the pastor, I'm ready to come home. And
That's beautiful.
I knew that's where I belonged. But I had so much guilt and shame, and it's still, like just talking about it can come back. I remember how that little girl felt, and I have such compassion for her now. But so I committed my life to Christ at that point in time. And about a week later, I met this man that I was working with who was telling me all about his faith and how he was serving in the church. And I just was like, oh, God just brought this man to me. And I was certain that—
You're like, okay, there it is. He did it. He brought me.
Yeah.
Right. That's, I know.
And I was like, dude, I'm pregnant, and he's like, I don't care. He just fell in love with me and wanted to raise my baby. And I'm just like, this has got to be God. Right.
Right.
And so we got married.
Okay.
Just a couple months after my daughter was born. And within a month, he became physically abusive.
Wow.
And
because
that went on for—
Wait, Michelle, bring me back. I want to, so I can hear that. Okay, so you meet this guy. Tell us again, how old were you when you were pregnant? How old were you?
22. I was 22.
Okay, and then how far along pregnant were you when you met him?
I wasn't quite showing yet. I think I was just like at the end of my first trimester.
Okay, so it was early on, very early on in your pregnancy. Okay, so you meet this guy, and in the beginning, because you went back and you went to church, and you're like, I'm going back into my faith. That's how we grew up as a child, but I'm in a different place right now. How long did you guys actually get to know each other before you married him? Not long. Okay. That's good.
Not
That's
long,
good
no.
to know. Okay.
Yeah,
So talk about that a little bit, because us women, Michelle, this is what we do. We do this.
I always fell hard and fast, and then was just like zoned in.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay. So now you're married to the guy. You're married to the guy. He looks good for a second, and then he turns on you. And really, seriously, not only he turns on you, you're married, and you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Or you just had the baby, and he turns on you, and then he becomes physically abusive.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I think we were married for 5 months before I left.
Okay.
Another very scary time.
Yeah.
And then, so fast forward a couple years down the road, I then met and married my second husband. We dated for longer. I think we dated for 1.5 years, but still not, not for long.
And I want to say something about the first husband with, how fast you went and you didn't know him, and then you have it. Thank goodness you left, Michelle. That takes courage and strength not to be in a situation like that. And if anyone's listening to us right now, if you are in a relationship, and it's toxic and physical, I just want to say this: get out. You cannot change someone if they are physically hurting you and mentally abusing you. So that has nothing to do with anything else besides get out now. If someone's physically abusing you, this is not something we work through. This is something we leave. So I just want to make that very clear. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Okay. So Michelle gets out. Now she's, a single mama with her baby. Because how old was your baby at the time now?
She was 6 months old when I left. Yeah.
Okay. So she's a little one. She's little. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then she was 2.5 when I got married again.
Okay.
And this time I married a man who, like me, had also been married, and he had a small child.
Okay.
So
my daughter and his son were actually only 3 months apart.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. 3 months apart. Okay.
Yeah, so I basically like raised them like they were twins. Like I potty trained them the
Yes.
same week.
I said, Michelle, you had twins. I actually have twins. And I'm like, that sounds like it to me. Same time, same thing, same process. Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine.
So we had what I thought was a great marriage. We
Okay.
both served in ministry. We were involved with the youth group at our church, went on mission trips with them. We had a child of our own, so we had 3 kids together. And as we were approaching our 10-year anniversary, I discovered that he had been unfaithful pretty much our entire marriage. Living a double life, essentially.
Living a double life.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Looking back now, and I know that was a while ago, and I know, now this is, has a lot to do with the work you're doing now. Looking back now, like you just said earlier, you're like, it seemed like we had a great marriage. Do you see things differently now? Can you look back now and see the red flags, or were you like completely blinded by, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I want people to hear this too. Like if you're in a marriage, because I hear that often too, Michelle, like I hear people that are in marriages and they're like, I don't know what happened, like seriously, like I thought we were good. And then, the person either steps out of the marriage or something. Some people will say, no, like I thought we were good, but I saw red flags. There's all different levels. So I want to know you personally looking back. Can you see things now, or is it still really hard, to see things?
I still cannot see things during the marriage. He traveled a lot for work, and so a lot happened when we were physically apart.
Got it. Okay,
so there was no
that makes sense.
sense of it. A lot of this also happened before, this was in the, in the 90s, early 2000s, like cell phones, people weren't texting. We didn't have internet on phones.
You couldn't like FaceTime, no texting, no, finding out where they're at. I got you. It
was a different time.
Yes.
But no, I didn't have any of those suspicions. However, as far as red flags go, I can take responsibility in saying that I married a man that I knew was a liar. And I fooled myself.
All right, Michelle, say that again. You married a man what? I'm sorry, it just went off for a second. You married a man what?
I knew he was a liar.
Oh, you did?
I knew that he lied in his business. I knew that he lied to his ex-wife, so I saw this pattern, but I fooled myself into thinking, well, yeah, but he really loves me. He's not going to lie to me.
Michelle, why do we do that as women? Seriously? What is up with that, and how can we start changing that?
Don't fool yourself. Like it's like we want that to be the case because somehow that's going to put us here. If he lied to all those other people, but he doesn't lie to us, then we're special. We want to believe that we're special, and they tell us that we're special, and so we want to believe that, And I didn't want to believe that he was cheating on me. It took me a long time to really uncover all of that. It was toward the end, I was talking to some girlfriends about some things, and now I honestly can't even remember what they were anymore, but just some things that weren't adding up. And they're like, Michelle, you need to investigate a little bit. Okay. I remember them telling me you need to get into his email. And that's
they saw something. Yeah. Okay. So wow, let's go there. Good for your girlfriends. Listen, when you have some good friends, I'm telling you, good for them. Ladies, listen to this. If you are in a situation and, like Michelle said, maybe there was something there, but then she was like, no, we don't want to believe what's the truth sometimes. Right. And I totally get that. But talk to people you trust. A small circle, and people that maybe can see things differently than you are seeing things. So you happen to have a conversations with your girlfriends just about certain things, and they're the ones that are like, Michelle, something's off.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what happened?
Yeah. So then I came home that day, and I must have called him because we didn't have texting then, and I said, remember when you said that I could have your email password? I'd like to have your email password. And he said, well, I can't give that to you. And I knew as soon as he said, I can't give that to you, that something was going on. So yeah, I discovered everything. And we divorced, and it was devastating to me.
Yes.
Because I thought that I finally had arrived, that I had the family. I mean, I adored my family. I was a stay-at-home mom.
Yep.
So, the thought of leaving without any income of my own was very scary.
Yes.
I hadn't worked in 10 years. So it was very, very scary. But beyond the scary part, it was so difficult for me because my entire identity was wrapped up in being a wife and mom.
Correct.
Partially because of the way that I grew up, and that's, that was my dream. And then I thought I had arrived, that I had achieved that dream. And so I had just wrapped my entire identity into that. And I didn't know how to function outside of those roles.
Wow. I can really understand this. Wow. So now you find yourself, Michelle, you're like, oh no, this is like truly my worst nightmare. Like, where do I go from here? Because I would think at the time, because like you said, like you really did believe in marriage. You really did, believe in, raising a family and, doing life with your husband, doing life with someone. And now your life gets completely shattered. And you're like, uh-oh, where do you go from here, Michelle?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, where I went from there was exactly where I went my whole life. I went right back into the dating field and didn't take time to heal. I relied on that attention and that affection from other men to heal me, thinking that it would. But it didn't. It just was a temporary ointment putting on a gaping wound.
And at the time, I mean, again, think about that. Like, we are not taught that stuff, like really, we are not taught, after you have a breakup, or if you are in relationships that are not working, or whatever happens in our lives, we are not taught to take time to really also heal and look inwards and start finding out, like, where am I playing a part in it? Not that you played a part in the sense of him being a liar and him, cheating. No. But where did you play a part? Like you said earlier, I thought, I really saw that he was a liar. I really saw that he was a dishonest person. And people, you guys, listen to this. People show you their truth. I'm telling you right now, people will, if we really pay attention to what's going on and how people are with other people, are going to be how they really are with you. Like if so, like that, like you say that with, if you have a girlfriend and she's all gossiping about her other girlfriend all the time, let me tell you, she's gonna gossip about you too. So that right there, that's not the one you want to tell your secrets to. So I can see that, but we don't learn that, Michelle, right? Like we don't get to learn that. So we just go into, our patterns. And we fall right into relationship after relationship. Some of us, I don't know, some of us do get it. I get it. Some of us are like, take the time to do the healing. It's like, okay, but I don't think that's the majority. I don't think that's the majority of us as women.
I definitely don't think
I don't.
Yeah.
So what happens here, Michelle? So what happens?
Well, I need to back up a little bit because when I was in that relationship and we were serving in ministry, I had a very strong relationship with Christ, and and in about halfway into our marriage, I guess about 5-6 years in, I did discover some infidelity, but it was more pornography related, I guess I'll put it that way. And I was devastated then, and I remember specifically on a Saturday evening at a church service, just crying out to God and just saying, why are you allowing this to happen to me? Like, you that I've always wanted to be a wife and mom. How could you possibly take this away from me? And I just felt his presence wash over me, and felt very strongly in that moment that he said to me, I will give you the desires of your heart. And it just, a calm washed over me, and I was certain that that meant that he would restore my marriage. So,
Okay.
in the coming years, I just trusted that he was going to heal all that. And, and we did go to therapy and did, went through all of the motions, and I
Okay.
just trusted that, okay, God told me that he was going to give me the desires of my heart, and he knows this is my desire. So I just kind of left that there. Well, when it was clear that my marriage was ending, I became very angry with God.
Okay.
I felt like he had lied to me. Like, how could you, in such a vulnerable, weak moment in my life, comfort me with those words? Like, almost, how dare you? And I was devastated. And I turned my back on God.
Okay.
During that time. I lost all of my Christian friends.
Yep.
No fault of theirs. It's just what happens. They don't want to take sides, and it's awkward, and
and they're like, I don't know what to do now, Michelle. Right. They're like, Michelle, we had you at, you believe in God with us, but now you're mad at him and we're not sure what to do. Yeah. Some people just don't know what to do.
Right. And you're getting divorced, and we were friends with your husband. And so, it's just, I get it. It's
and divorce. And Michelle, let's talk about that real quick. Divorce. Oh my goodness. I've gone through divorce. Divorce is horrible. I'm just telling you, regardless if you want it, don't want it, whatever. It is horrific. I still, to this day, and how long I've been doing this work and how many people have I talked to, you never hear of a divorce that's like, oh, everything's great, we just got divorced. No, I mean, good people do bad things during divorce. Let me just say this loud and clear. Like, you can be like you just go, it can be very toxic. It can be very scary. It can be very all the things. So I am so sorry you went through that experience, because I went through a really bad divorce too. And it broke me for a moment there. Yeah. So let's talk about that. So now, you're mad at God, and you're thinking, why would God do this to me? And we both, I hope, we go through this process of our faith and everything like that. So you're in this, why would God do this to me? Now I'm losing everyone. Now how am I going to start all over? So what happens here? What happens here?
Yeah. So I started dating, got on dating apps. Nothing super serious. And then a couple years later, I started working as a teacher at a private school.
Okay.
And I met who is now my current husband.
Okay.
And so an interesting story in regard to that is on our the third day of us kind of being a couple.
Okay.
I randomly had somebody post on my Facebook wall at the time.
Okay.
That's what they call it. And just this random post, and it was Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. The same verse that God shared with me in that time when I was going through a rough time in my marriage. That, by that time, it was probably 10 years prior to that.
Yes.
But what was interesting is earlier that day, I had just shared that story with my now husband.
Okay.
And so it was like, it was fresh in my mind.
Yes.
And then I saw this, and it was just like, what in the world? That is so bizarre.
Yes.
And so I turned to him and I said, would you be interested in going to church with me tonight? I just feel like we should go.
Yeah.
And we had both been we both grew up in very similar backgrounds, but we both had
kind of separated yourself from the Lord. Like you said, you were mad. You were in a mad stage. Yeah. You were like, I don't know. Okay. Got it.
And so we went to the service that evening. And as we walked in, I couldn't tell you what any of the songs were, but the lyrics were up on the board, and whatever all of the lyrics just reminded us both of the conversations that we had been having in those first 3 days together. Wow. And we just stood there with tears
Wow.
I couldn't believe it was just unbelievable. And so then the pastor started speaking, and he was talking about how God calls us to him. And he said, it's kind of like when a friend calls you, he's across the street and he just calls you to him and he says, "Hey, Jim, come here." That's my husband's name.
What's your husband's name?
That's my husband's name. Like my current husband, I was there. Yes. I was at the service with him. His name is Jim. And the pastor said, it's like God calling you like a friend. And he says, "Hey, Jim," like he specifically said Jim. And like, it was just so bizarre.
Goodness, what did Jim do? Jim's like, is he talking? Do I get up and shout? Is it me? Oh my goodness, I'm calling. Oh Lord, hallelujah. Oh my goodness, that must have been such a trip for Jim and you. So, and you're like, are they talking to us?
Yeah.
Wow.
Then,
what a coincidence.
Yes. Now I do believe that, I do honestly believe that God brought us together. However, what I saw as signs in our dating, when we were dating.
Getting to know your courtship. Yeah.
In hindsight, like, yes, did God bring us together? Yes, he did. But God is not going to just bring a man into your life as your savior.
Perfect.
He wants to be your savior. He wants to be first in your life. Correct. And I was putting Jim first.
Got it.
So, it's like, I felt like, oh, okay, God approves of this. So then it's just, I put all of my eggs in the Jim basket.
Yeah. And Michelle, and you know what too? And remember what you said earlier. You hadn't had an opportunity yet or an understanding yet to also, do your own healing, to do your own stuff, right? To do your own looking inwards. Because you said earlier, you're like, listen, girlfriend, I've been for 6 years old. Remember, Miss Michelle is 6 years old. Little Miss Michelle. She got her little boyfriends, and she has been boyfriend from after boyfriend, and you've had, relationships that didn't work out to think. So this makes a lot of sense, Michelle. Seriously, this makes a lot of sense. Okay,
it was all that I ever knew.
It's all you knew, Mama. Of course, that's all you knew.
So we got married. Okay. And it was this whirlwind romance that was just amazing. I loved our story. And actually, there's one other part of that was...
Okay, let's hear it, Sean.
So in a last-ditch effort to put our family back together, my ex-husband said, "Let's go to church together."
Okay.
And so we go, and we're sitting there. For some reason, our kids weren't able to go to their Sunday school class or whatever. And so we were sitting there as me, him, and our 2 kids over here.
And the kids.
And the sermon was about marriage.
Oh.
And I sat there and just sobbed through the whole thing and used him as a shield so that my kids wouldn't see me crying.
Yeah, they're like, what is wrong with mom? Okay, yeah, I got you.
So I sat there just sobbing through the entire thing. And there was a woman in front of us that just turned around and gave me a tissue. Like I wasn't prepared for this.
She said, this lady, yeah.
Okay, so fast forward to after my current husband and I got engaged.
Okay.
We went to church together, and we just randomly sat next to this couple, and we were talking before the service started, and then the music started playing, and we started singing, and I've only felt God speak to me a handful of times, but I'm sharing a couple of them with you.
Okay, it's beautiful.
And I felt very strongly, he said, "That is the woman that gave you tissues. I need you to thank her."
No.
And I felt
you're like, what is up right now? I'm going to thank this lady?
I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, I tap her on the shoulder and I said, this might sound really crazy, but about 4 years ago,
oh my gosh,
I was sitting around here at this church, and the sermon was about marriage, and my family was falling apart, and I just sat here crying, and somebody gave me tissues, and she goes, "That was me. I've been praying for you."
Oh, Michelle, you just got me goosies. Ooh, I haven't had goosies in a while. Ooh, mama girl. Ooh, that's good.
It was crazy.
So you had your little
So
angel girlfriend.
crazy.
Wow, beautiful.
So
Uh-huh.
it was so abundantly clear to me that I was
Yeah.
to marry this man.
Mhm.
And we, like I said, we had this amazing just passion and love for one another, but it was an unhealthy love. It was a
Okay.
codependent love. It was
Okay.
it was an obsessive love. It was a love that surpassed our love for God.
Okay.
Um, and that got us into trouble.
Okay. That makes
That
sense.
that led to some jealousy, some
Mhm.
insecurity. We
Mhm.
both came
Mhm.
in as hurting people. That
Yes.
was part of what
Yes.
bonded us together, even.
Yeah, I can
Um,
see that.
and hurt people,
Yes.
and
Yes.
we ended up hurting one another in those first 5 years.
Well, let me say
And
something too, Michelle. I'm going to interrupt you
Mhm.
again. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that real quick. So, for people listening right now, what I have also learned, and Michelle is explaining, her journey and what's happened, we can actually meet the right person that we should be married to 100%. And it can be on fire. Okay. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be some work to do here. Okay.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
I truly believe this. I truly believe when you really meet the right person for you is when the work starts, in the sense of learning one another, and not just
Mhm.
learning one another, learning yourself,
Mhm.
and learning, how you're showing up, learning how, adjusting to how they're showing up, what it is that we really need. So if you find yourself, like, Michelle's about to go into this next story with her and her husband, she felt this time differently. Like, she felt, okay, like there's something here, that this is the person for me. But that doesn't mean just because you meet the person, you're just gonna get married and everything's gonna be peaches and cream.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
we can go through waves, and we can lose ourselves. And what I think I'm really, really loving about this also is, I know a little bit about, this, what she's going to get into is so good. But we can lose ourselves, and how she's going to explain the next process of what she went through is so important. So keep going, Michelle.
Yeah. So as we were approaching our 5-year anniversary,
Mm-hmm.
um, the he was becoming increasingly emotionally abusive,
Okay.
emotionally and verbally abusive.
Okay.
And there was an instance where he kind of exploded on my oldest daughter. Essentially, she then had to deal with what I had been dealing with, but
Got it.
Mama Bear came out, and it's one of those things where even this, I feel like, was what we needed, because
Yeah.
he was being abusive toward me, and I tolerated it, and I tolerated it, and I tolerated it, and I enabled it, and I tolerated it. But as soon as I saw it happening to my daughter, I was like, whoa,
Mm.
this can't happen.
Exactly. It's different, isn't it, Michelle?
It's
And
different.
again, why do us women do that? Like, we can see things and we think, right? We're like, okay, you know, um, I'm enabling this. I love that you said that too. I do. Because, like, if someone's treating us a certain way and doing a certain thing to us, right? It's really up to us if we're going to allow it or not allow it. And so you started realizing, okay, I am allowing this. This is not cool. Oh, no, no, but you ain't going to mess with my child. That's a whole other level. And as a mama too, I get this. But sometimes it's hard for us to see it ourselves before it even goes there. So you see it. So now you're like mama bear mode. You bring your attitude with the kids now. I see that. I can see that.
So when I saw this happen to my daughter,
Okay, hold on. You saw this happen to your daughter. Okay.
I asked for a separation.
Okay.
And my intention was not to get divorced. I told him, I don't want to get divorced. I love you. I
Okay.
want to work through this,
Mhm.
but this is not acceptable,
Mhm.
and this cannot happen in my home.
Yeah.
And so he moved out.
Okay. Because you
Um,
said earlier, Michelle, I just want to repeat this again. You said earlier, when you both met, everybody listen to this. This is really important. There's a good part here. When you both met, you yourself and your husband himself had things that you guys haven't cleared. and taken care
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
already. You were
Yes.
both very wounded.
Yes. And
And yes, that makes a lot of sense. Michelle, talk about that for a second.
well, and I think like, they talk about like that trauma bond, but I feel like
Hmm.
we were like trauma dumping on one another, and that bonded us.
Yes,
But it
yes,
bonded us in an unhealthy way. It was two
correct.
hurting people who found a connection with another hurting individual that could relate with them, and so that
Ye-
felt good, and that's
Yes,
understandable.
yes, yes.
Um, it makes sense that we were drawn to one another,
Hmm.
and it's interesting because that I mean, and if I had been healed,
Hmm.
if I had been in a better place, I wouldn't have been attracted to someone that was hurting and healing.
Hmm. Hmm.
You
And
know,
he wouldn't probably either, right?
right,
Same thing,
right.
right?
You
So,
would.
like, if he did his own, like, it would
Mhm.
have been differently. He would have been looking for something different in the sense.
Yes,
It doesn't mean, you guys, listen. It doesn't mean that Michelle and her man weren't ultimately meant to be together. It's just like they really took the harder route.
yes. Yeah.
They really took the harder route. But
Mhm.
that makes sense, Michelle. That's why it is important. That's why I
Mhm.
do what I'm doing too, because, not everyone should be together, but I believe that, there's certain people that can get together and have to go through a lot of stuff to, be able to clear themselves, the
Yeah.
stuff that they're going through. Because this had a lot to do with what he was going through, but it was coming out on you. He was,
Mhm.
he was projecting that on you. Okay, so what happens, Michelle? So
Yeah.
you tell him, I love you. I want to be with you. I want to make this work. When we're cool, we're cool. But this ain't going to fly. Like,
Yeah.
this is a no, 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 no. And then you probably realize, wow, I haven't ever had a chance myself as a woman.
Yeah.
Okay,
This
talk about
was
that,
the
Michelle.
only
What
this is
happened?
the only time in my life where I
Okay.
was single. I didn't consider myself single, but I was
Yeah.
not dating anyone.
No, 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 no.
And was just able to focus on myself. I
Wow.
wasn't looking for the next partner. Any other time if the relationship was dying or was not
Yeah.
doing well, I would have been like, all right, well,
Mhm.
what else is out there?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was not my intention. I wanted my marriage to work. Um, but especially in the first 6 months of that, he was kind of bitter that
Okay.
I kicked him out. So he wasn't
Yeah.
really ready to do the work. We tried couples counseling, and that resulted in some of our nastiest arguments.
Yep.
Because ultimately, and I found this with a lot of my clients as well, a lot of times when we go to couples counseling, it's like we're searching for a third party to take our side. And so you end up almost like telling on your spouse, well, this is what he did, and then this is what she did. And really we need to just be focusing on, this is my role, this is how I'm contributing, and that's not what was happening. So
That's really good, Michelle. Look, I'm gonna say something cool.
yeah, go ahead.
It's really good that you said that because, I have come to realize all the levels and layers of that type of getting help. And what I truly believe now is, because I was married to my ex-husband for 23 years. I ended up leaving that marriage. And we went to your traditional couples therapy. And what I call it now, NIP, the nail in the coffin, or
Mm,
NIC. That's what I say, the nail in the coffin. Because if you are not seriously, then, and for our situation, because if you are not going to a person that's really addressing the individual
mhm,
people, then you are doing exactly what you just said. You're
mhm,
just wanting someone to agree with you, and you just continue on pointing fingers to each other. So I
mhm,
am a big believer, 1000%, on getting help and getting the right help, not just
mhm,
going to any type of, counselor, marriage
mhm,
counselor, because trust me, let me tell you something. There's some amazing marriage counselors out there that do the best work for people. They really do. Amazing coaches, like you,
mhm.
Michelle, with the work that you, how you help people, that really get this. But it's like anything else. If you're going to the wrong one, it can make it worse, Michelle. Right? Like it can, it
Yeah.
can, it can drive you a little bit crazy. Okay, so what
Yeah.
happened? So now you're going to this place and you realize, okay, that's not really working. So
Yeah.
he's not happy. You're thinking, oh no, this is not like what's going to happen here.
Yeah. Well, so, and I was doing some individual counseling with that
Okay.
same therapist, and
Mm-hmm,
he
mm-hmm,
mentioned to me, he said, Michelle, you're codependent. Have you ever,
mm-hmm.
looked into this? And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I'm not
Not me.
codependent. Like
Yep, yep.
I always attributed that to somebody that was with an addict.
Okay.
And when I started reading up on codependency, I was like, I think my picture is in the dictionary.
Michelle goes, there I am.
Like, oh my goodness, why didn't anybody tell me this? My whole life, it made everything make sense. I was like, yes, this
Yeah,
is,
that's me. That makes more sense to me. Of course. Of
yes.
course.
And,
Yes.
and getting that understanding, and then I actually started going to Codependence Anonymous groups.
Oh, that's good.
And just like getting the support of other people. And I just realized how much work I needed to do on myself, because when you're codependent, then you are relying on something outside of you for your happiness.
Oh, that's beautiful. I was just going to ask you, can you explain to the
Yeah.
listeners what codependency is?
Yeah. Yeah. It's when you need something outside of you to be good in order for you to be good. So that can manifest in a lot of different ways. Yes,
Okay.
it can be with an addict relationship, so
Okay.
like if you're with somebody that is an addict, you want them to be happy. And so you end up kind of enabling the behavior because you also have a need to be needed. And this was the part that really impacted me.
Okay.
Because my whole life, I always poured myself into relationships and would do all of these things to just prove that I was worthy. I mean, I would make them meals. I would go clean their house. I would trim their bushes. I would rake their leaves. And I'm not
You did
kidding
it
you.
all.
All of those things.
I believe you. I
in the
really
first month
believe
of
you.
a
I love that
relationship.
you're talking about this, Michelle. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I love that you're talking about this. Like you thought that was your worth. Like is if I
Yeah.
can do the more I can do for them, the more I can please them, the more I can make them happier, the more they're gonna
Right.
want me, the more they're gonna think and that's what I need to do. Because remember, my grandma said I should be with a man since I was 6
Mhm.
years old.
Right.
Yeah, we're
Right.
not blaming Miss Grandma. We're not blaming the
No,
grandma.
no.
We're just saying no. We're just saying how things do have an
Mhm.
impact on us from a very young age. Okay, so
Yeah.
then you're learning about this.
And this was the way that I received love.
Mhm,
I just looked at it that was my love language. My love language is
mhm,
acts of service. And
mhm.
so I would always serve, but I would serve to the until I was completely empty. And I would serve out of a place of emptiness. I would serve out of a place
Mm,
of desperation because I desperately needed to be needed.
that
And
wow,
then I would
so good.
turn on those people, whether that was a spouse or a child, because they didn't appreciate or they didn't return it. And they didn't know that was the deal.
Mhm, mhm,
And
mhm. And you
subconsciously,
didn't either, Michelle. You didn't know that you were in
no,
that in
no.
that little loop. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Until this person
Mhm.
said, "Michelle, you're codependent."
Mhm.
So what did you do? So you started learning. Oh my goodness, this makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did that shift you?
It shifted me in a number of different ways, but I think that the primary way is that I was able to take ownership for my role. And like you said,
Oh,
even if you're only 1% responsible for the demise of your relationship, you still
correct.
should take some time to figure out what was that role? What
Yeah,
what how did you show up in that relationship? How did you enable their behavior?
correct.
Um, and taking ownership of that was empowering because then I no longer felt like a victim. I always thought that I just had a faulty picker, like my picker was broken.
Yeah, yeah, we get into that victim, "Oh, it's the guy,
Yeah,
it's all him, it's all me, it's not me, it's all
exactly.
him, it's not me."
Hmm.
Michelle, so many of us, that's really that's kinda how we're programmed, like, it's so hard to look and see ourselves, and ladies, that is the most important thing to do. But okay, so you thought all this time it was, You're a bad picker.
Yeah. And I want to speak a little bit on what you just said, that
Yes.
yes, it's natural. It's human nature that we blame. But
Yep.
what I've learned is that blame and shame are like twin
Yes.
brother and sister kind of.
Yeah,
But they're
talk about that.
when something goes wrong in a relationship or whatever, we go to blame, because if we acknowledge that we have ownership in that, then a lot of times that comes with shame. So we want to lessen the pain of our shame, and we do that by blaming. And then that makes it so that we don't have to even acknowledge
Yes.
where, the role that we play. And we often do that even, like in divorce.
Okay.
I was just having a conversation recently about how we will always, when somebody asks you why you got divorced, it's just human nature that you tell them what your partner did. That's why I got divorced.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
We all do that.
Yes. Yes.
Because there's shame that's associated with divorce. And so it's like this hot potato, and we're holding this hot potato of shame, and we're like, I don't want this. You take it. But while we do that, neither of us are taking ownership. We're both pointing the fingers, and nothing's changing because we're so busy blaming.
Oh,
and when we
Michelle, that's so good you're saying this. Keep going. I'm sorry. I'll ask you afterwards. Keep going. This is so good.
But the antidote to shame, and
Okay.
I lived with shame my whole life. This is how my father raised me, was through shame.
Yep.
So then I had that inner voice, that inner critic that would feed into that, thinking that if I just shamed myself enough, I wouldn't do that again.
Yes. Wow.
But shame doesn't heal the pain.
No.
It just leaves you stuck in it. And what I've come to learn in the last 7+ years since our separation is that what I needed was not to shame myself, but to have compassion. To have compassion for all of the younger versions of myself that were doing the best they knew how, in the only way they knew how. If they knew there was another way to get love, they would have chosen it.
Absolutely.
But they were just doing what they've always done. And once my eyes were open to another way, first of all, to show myself compassion, that was completely foreign to me.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes.
Foreign. And I feel like that is one of the most life-changing things I've ever done for myself.
Oh,
because
wow.
When you give yourself compassion, you can also give that away. And you can give from a place of fullness, not a place of desperate neediness.
Wow.
I am able to have such compassion for my clients because not only because of all that I have been through, but because also I know that that's what they need. And I want to model that for them so that they can feel the healing power of compassion. In fact, before Jesus healed people, almost all of the instances in the Bible where Jesus healed, it says first, he was filled with compassion.
Yes.
And then he healed them.
Wow.
So the compassion component, I think, is critical in healing. We think that shame is going to do it. If I just shame myself enough, I won't fall into that pattern. No. You fell into that pattern because you were seeking love. You were seeking approval. You were seeking validation.
Correct.
In the only way you knew how.
And you did the best you can. You did the best you can. So you go through this. That's beautiful, Michelle. You go through this self-discovery and this opportunity for you to give yourself truly all the grace and all the compassion that you have for so many years given others. And you were able to look inwards and really say, oh, no wonder I've made the decisions that I've made. No wonder I've been looking for love in all the wrong places, when I grew up.
Yeah.
That is so powerful, Michelle. And I hope everyone is listening right now If you also find yourself like just really, in shame and beating yourself up and thinking, "Oh God, here I go again. I can't get this right." All those things. I want you to listen to this very, very loud and clear. We can, you know, look at things differently. We can look at things in a way that can serve us, and we can give ourselves grace and compassion. Thank you for saying that, Michelle.
Yeah.
So you go through this process, this,
Mhm.
discovery,
Yeah.
this, learning how to like look at Miss Michelle and look at her and say, "Hey, hey, you know what? Look, you've been through a lot too, Missy." How did that start then shifting you to have a different relationship and stay with your husband? Because you said that the first six
Yeah.
months, you were working on Michelle and he
Mhm.
was mad.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
when did things and you were still, with your faith, but you were
Mhm.
looking at things differently for the first time. You were
Yeah.
able to really look at things differently for the first time. Before I ask you this question, I'm going to go
Mm.
back real quick.
Yeah.
Now looking back, with your faith and stuff, and looking back at when you said with your first marriage, when you were mad at God, right? You were like, why did you do this? Like, why did, we
Mhm.
break up and all like that? What did you discover about God then that you didn't know? Because, we know that now God doesn't punish us, but what did you discover now?
Right. I mean, I discovered that he was always with me. And
Mhm,
and the way that I ended up looking at that separation was
mhm.
actually I viewed it as an opportunity that God
Yes,
was giving me
yes.
to do it to do it right, to do it
Yeah.
in a way that honored him and that even honored myself, that honored my
Mhm,
true self, where I was
mhm,
showing up um, as the woman that God created me to be and not searching for love in all these other places.
mhm,
I
mhm.
was I was grounded in my faith and and had that vision of who I wanted to be, who God created me to be. And I was determined that that was how I was going to show up. I wasn't going to show up anymore as my triggered self. And, like
Mhm.
that's a whole other thing that I think is so important to understand where your triggers come from, because they come from a lot of times from our youth, from wounds from our past. And,
Absolutely.
and when we're not consciously aware of that, then we think it's our partners that are triggering us, but they're
Correct.
just bringing to the surface a wound that we haven't healed from yet.
Yes. Yes,
Um,
that's so good.
so understanding that was so key. But I I wanted to be a woman of God, and
Mhm.
I wanted to be that whether I stayed in my marriage or not. And so
Yes.
I wasn't doing it for my husband. I wasn't changing for him. I was becoming who I was always created to be. And I finally had the space
Mhm,
to dive into that and to
mhm.
explore that.
That's
And
so good, Michelle. That's so good you said that because often, like, we can ask God and we can pray and we can say for what we want, right? And God always delivers, but it's not necessarily in our timing. It's not necessarily what we think what is going to happen. He does it in a completely different way than we can ever imagine until we go through that.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of God because he is always there. And sometimes it's us, and what we're going through as individuals that we can't see through the forest yet, right?
Mhm.
Because we're thinking, okay, I want this, God, I want this and this, but he's like, oh, daughter, I have so much more
Mhm.
for you.
Yeah.
I have so much more for you. So you go through this process of having, this 6 months. Oh, hold on a
Mhm.
second. Okay. This studio? Oh, okay. Just to wrap it up. Okay, got it. Um, so right back. So you go through this um life-changing experience
Mhm.
of obviously you are, going, you're separated, you're learning about yourself, you're learning how to forgive yourself. How did things shift then? Like what ended up happening with your husband and you, and how did you guys actually get back together?
Well, one of the turning points was his birthday, which is actually coming up this Sunday. And so it had been about the 6, maybe 7 months into it. And it was his 46th birthday. And I wrote him a letter with 46 things that I appreciated about him in that. And that really was a turning point for us because he started to see something different in me.
Oh, wow.
And then there were some instances that came up where, he said or did some things that hurt me. And the way that I responded to that took him off guard. He was like, wait a minute, like this is. So he started to see that there was something different. And then by August, so I think it was like 8 months in, he's like, I'm all in. I want to work through this. So it was we were separated for another 10 months, but this time we were actively working through it and both working to be our best selves. Because just like how like attracts like, right? But if this is where we started and then I end up here, then he has a choice. He can either rise to my level,
yes,
or sink in his own dysfunction.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And he rose and so that we could be matched. Like, so it was, I did not change my spouse, but I inspired him.
You inspired him. I say that. Oh, that's beautiful. You said that. I say that often. You can have a marriage, right? And it can get off track. The alignment can really get tough. But somebody has to start, and if you have the right person for you, and you have the right alignment, and usually I tell you, ladies, I know it's usually us women. We're the ones that, if we start it, the good man, a man that's for us, he will come along. If we start it and he doesn't come along, then he's just not the right guy for you. That's just real. Okay. So you started it. You're like, okay, I'm going inwards. I'm changing. I'm having more grace. And in return, that gave him an opportunity to be like, oh, wow. Okay, we're doing this differently now.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of what I kind of refer to as our second marriage. Your
second marriage.
The first 5 years, I had to grieve the loss of that. There was a lot of amazing passion in there, but we are different people now than we were in those first 5 years, and much healthier people.
Much healthier. So how would you say now, Michelle? Like, seriously, what a story. Yeah. Oh, what a how would you say now your marriage is? What is life like with you and your husband?
Life is completely different because I feel like I can be my true self and be fully known and fully loved. And there's safety there. We have there's no topic that we can't bring up. There's no conversation that we can't have. And I love that. He's my best friend.
Oh, that is amazing. Michelle, let me ask you a question. For, the ladies that are listening today, and they're single and they're looking for love. And they also find themselves, not having the best of luck. And maybe for the first time, they're thinking, am I codependent? Like, maybe, or maybe I'm not, or maybe it's not the guys, maybe it's me. Where should they start? What advice would you give them?
The advice that I would give them would be to start with curiosity, to become curious. Look back on your relationships. How have you shown up? What are some common themes in your relationships? Do you seem to attract a partner that is emotionally unavailable or abusive, or, like what happens in your relationship? Why do they end? And how do you show up? How are you responding to them when they upset you? How do you respond? And just getting curious, not to be judgmental or critical, but to just notice.
Yeah.
And then ask yourself, like, why am I showing up that way? And begin to have compassion for those younger versions of yourselves that were doing the best they knew how. And the next thing that I would actually recommend them doing is when they're single, not only like start healing and work with somebody to go through that process, but make a list of the things that you want in a relationship. The absolute, like, these would be deal breakers. I have to have this in a relationship. because when we're in a relationship, that gets skewed. And,
Yes.
And we're like, oh, well, like I was, oh, I know he's a liar, but
Yeah.
but he won't lie to me.
Well, I mean, no. So we're like, ladies, if he's a liar, then he's a liar and he's going to lie to you. So be
Yeah.
aware of that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
You need to have a destination in mind. And what I mean by that is, what type of man do you want? And don't just have it up here, like literally write it down.
Oh, so good.
So that you can come back and refer to that.
Yes.
That was actually one of the things that I did a month before I met him. And I had 20 things and he met 19 of them. The only one he had was hair. But I love his bald head. So.
Oh, I love this. Oh, this is so inspiring. Michelle, no, seriously, how do people get into your world? How can they work with you? And tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So I have a program called Renewed that takes you through this process of connecting to yourself and giving yourself compassion so that you can heal those parts of you that have been searching for love and fill that with compassion and love. And I teach you how to do that so that you can show up as your true self, not your triggered self. A lot of times we show up as our triggered self 90% of the time.
Yes.
So I teach about that and how we can work through triggers, how we can regulate our emotions, work through triggers, and become your true authentic self, the self that God created you to be, so that you can then set different standards for yourself and your relationships. And I actually have a free webinar right now.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. What is it called?
So it's called How to Resuscitate Your Dying Marriage and Reclaim the Life You Lost Inside of It.
Oh, so good.
You can find that on the link in my bio if you follow me through Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, I'm Heart, Mind, Soul Coach. I also have a YouTube page. And if you are interested in just setting up a call with me just to see if it would be a good fit to work with me, you can just send me a DM with the word coach and I will send you the scheduling link.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Michelle, actually, can you provide us with that link for that free webinar and we can put it directly on the show notes? How would you feel about that?
So that'd be great.
Okay, yeah. So if the listeners are right now like, oh, I want to have that, webinar, they can go directly to it and watch it, right? Because it's available, right, for everyone.
It is available. Yep.
Okay.
I jam pack it with as much free information as possible.
Okay, that's fantastic. And of course, you guys, listen, if you are just really resonating with what Michelle had to say today, it was like I sure have. Get into her world. Follow Michelle. Michelle has so much to offer. Me, Miss Charlene here. I just love the stuff that she puts out there. It's so powerful. It's so good. No, you're really making a difference, Michelle. Thank you so much. And, I'm going to leave you with the last word. Is there anything else that you want to say today as we're wrapping this up? Because you guys follow Michelle. What would you like to say?
I just want to leave you with have compassion for yourself. We all make mistakes. Mistakes are an opportunity to learn and grow. And they get us closer to where we want to be.
That's beautiful. Oh, thank you, Michelle. Thank you for being on. That was fantastic. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you, Charlene.
And you're so welcome. And to next time, cheers to great love.
That's a wrap. What an incredible story. How even though Michelle has gone through relationships that didn't work out, she was still able to find love and for the first time in her life, learn about herself and lean into her faith and trust in God to ultimately realize that change is possible for any of us as long as we are willing to go inwards and take a deep look and have compassion for ourselves. And knowing great love is available for all of us. And it doesn't matter where we've been through. Never give up on love. Wow. Beautiful. If you're loving this podcast and these incredible conversations, please hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. Don't miss an episode because each week I'll be bringing on guests and experts who will share their knowledge about love, dating, and relationships so you can apply it into your own life. I'll see you next week. And until then, cheers to great love.